Welcome to Software Testing Unleashed, the podcast for testers, developers, and all software people who want to create best quality software. My name is Richie. I'm a software quality coach, author, and keynote speaker, and happy to bring you an episode live from the HUSTEF Conference 2025 in Budapest. HUSTEF is one of the greatest conferences I've ever been to. Top quality talks, amazing people, and a unique mix of friendly and intense atmosphere you only find at truly great events. If you have ever get the chance, go there. Seriously, you will love it. My guest today is Linda Van De Vooren. She is an experienced quality consultant and a baritone saxophonist. Why the saxophone is important for her testing career, she will explain later in this episode. We talked about mental health, especially the imposter syndrome. Linda shares her very personal stories about the imposter syndrome and mental health. And I think she's a great role model when it comes to openness and telling clear statements about how you feel and about your struggles. And now, enjoy the episode. Hi, Linda. Great to have you on the show here.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, it's great. I saw you at the pre-meetup of the HUSTEF. Your talk was amazing. I got so much information because you had the same problems I always confronted in my project. So it's great that you are now here and we can share another knowledge nugget for the community. Yeah, we talked up front what we can talk about, and you mentioned imposter syndrome.
Yes.
And it's a very important topic. So, but get us in there. What is it?
Imposter syndrome is the conception that you cannot do something despite evidence that you have that you can do it. Mm-hmm. And I have actual evidence that I'm an imposter in many ways. Yeah. And I've had to battle that to make a career and to accept myself for the person who I am.
Yeah.
And it's been a long journey.
Yeah. I can imagine. Does everyone have this imposter syndrome in it? So more or less.
I think a lot of people have. There are always things where you are in doubt if you can actually do it, or sometimes when I'm writing a test plan and I'm just writing stuff, and then I fear, like, what if they find out that I'm just writing some stuff?
Yeah.
But apparently some stuff is, for me, writing a test plan. Yeah. And that's what I'm good at. But in doing it, I doubt myself. Yeah. And in many other things.
I can think of that many can relate to that, because especially when you're good in something, then for ourselves it doesn't really have a value because we are good at it. But we don't know that. Yeah,
and I have imposter syndrome about a couple of things that people don't usually doubt.
Yeah.
If I can give an example,
sure.
I have 2 eating disorders. Mm-hmm. And for me, eating is always a challenge. Every time I have a meal, it's a challenge for me because I have anorexia. Mm-hmm. So I am very good at just not eating for long periods of time. And I also have a binge eating disorder. And I had therapy a couple of years ago, and I'm currently in a state where I can eat, but every time there's food, I have to think and tell myself I can eat this. I will also stop eating. Mm-hmm. And this food will not make me sick, and this food will not make me fat. Like, one meal is not going to. Yeah. And I know I am fat, and the eating disorders come from 25 years of unsuccessful dieting, of not wanting to be fat, but I still am. Yeah. So in the end, I chose to be fat but healthy. I have doctor's checks. I am healthy, but my relationship with food is still weird. But every time, like, we are at HUSTEF and there's this lunch buffet, and I see people getting lunch and eating it, and I keep thinking, how do they do that? And then I'm like, oh, look, I'm having the lunch. I feel like a true imposter. Like, is this how people eat without worry? So that's something that chases me daily.
Well, thank you that you are sharing this here. So I think it's a very personal story, and I think we often have such a personal thing in us, which is we have to deal with it, and it's great to share it. And maybe it is one strategy to come over it? Or what are your strategies too?
I found that if I just share about it, the worst thing that can happen is that people say, "Oh, I'm so sorry," or they say, "Your story helped me." And that's why I created my first conference talk ever was about imposter syndrome and about all the ways I suffer from it, and all the ways that all the tips I thought to deal with it. And it's a powerful story that really helps a lot of people, but it's difficult to give because my audience gets like an emotional bruise from it.
Yeah.
It's very tough to hear all those struggles in 25 minutes.
Yeah. How can I, when I think of my life and my working career, how can I determine that I'm now dealing with an imposter syndrome? What are typical thoughts I can have in this situation?
Yeah. For me, it's dealing with my internal critic caster.
Yeah.
The little voice inside of my head that says mean things to me all the time. Like, especially just now during lunch. Are you getting 3 sausages? Oh no.
Yeah.
They were great sausages. I ate them all. But I've learned to listen to the voice, identify the voice, and it helps me to understand when it's the voice and when it's my own thoughts.
Okay.
And to me, they are two separate things because my own thoughts don't harm me, but listening to that voice does.
Yeah.
And I've given that voice a nickname. I've given that voice like a metaphor.
Yeah.
It's a famous person from a movie, Silence of the Lambs. That voice is Hannibal Lecter.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Because it's very mean and it says the meanest things with a slight smile on its face.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Oh, very, very good metaphor for that.
And for me, it really helps to determine what am I listening to right now.
Yeah.
And usually I start listening to that voice when my basic needs aren't met, when I'm tired, hungry, or thirsty.
Yeah.
Hungry is difficult because I don't often identify hunger because of all the dieting. I've learned to ignore it, but usually it's if I just feed myself, water myself, and or rest. It's much easier to tell the voice, I hear you, but I'm not going to listen to you.
Yeah. Okay. And do you have also when you talk to people and hear their stories, when we look at our career or role of tester, what are their typical imposter syndromes like in our work daily work?
Yeah. When you are naturally good at something.
Yeah.
Like for me, it's easy to write a test plan.
Yeah.
I don't think about it much. I just do it and people are happy with it. So that's good. But the minute I start thinking about something that comes naturally to me, that's when I start doubting. And that's when the imposter kind of creeps in. And I think that's in especially a professional setting, when you start doubting things that are just easy to you, that's when you can get downhill really fast because maybe you are just good at it, but you are not actively realizing that you are just talented at that particular thing.
Yeah. And you mentioned sharing is one strategy of overcoming this imposter syndrome. Hopefully you have some other tips for us to deal with that.
Certainly, yeah. One of the other things is nobody sees all your flaws but you yourself. When you see yourself up close in the mirror, you're like, oh, this is me. But most people see me from this distance.
Yeah.
And you don't see all those details. And you don't see my thoughts. So when I start doubting what other people think of me or how I come across, I know that it's bad for me to think that it's my own mind that I should follow. So most people don't look that close and they are okay.
Okay, that's a good realization, no? That others don't see that lot of me than I do. Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing is I've become very aware of where my comfort zone is. We all know that magic happens outside of it, but outside of your comfort zone is uncomfortable. And I've started to look at the comfort zone as more, not like a solid line that you have to step out of, but like a rainbow. And on some days I can do one color with one toe. But on other days I can just go to the whole other side and be okay.
Yeah.
And I try to be aware of how okay I am getting out of my comfort zone. And on most days, I'm completely okay far outside it now.
Yeah.
But there are also days where I should just stay in and take good care of myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And being aware of how you're doing, that's
Yeah.
really helpful.
Yeah, I think there were all the things you mentioned have a lot to do with self-awareness. To think,
Yes.
to decide which voice is telling me something in my head and or in my body, and to be self-aware. How much can I go out now today in my workforce? So it's so. But a lot of people I know, especially in this technical area we are working, they don't have good contact to themselves in this way.
I also didn't used to have that.
Yeah. But how did you learn that?
I learned that in, I think, a couple of separate ways. Right now, let's start with now and then work back to the past. Right now, I'm in therapy because when I was younger, didn't learn how to regulate emotions. So right now in therapy, I'm learning that. I'm 42, and it's mind-boggling how many layers there are. I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I used to have like anger issues. I also spoke about it yesterday in my talk, how anger issues got me the insight that I should stop trying to do test automation because it just makes me angry. I'm not really good at it. And every time something bad happened, anger would pop up. And that would really influence my life and my quality of life and my connections with people. And I broke through that chain, I think, nearly 10 years ago by doing a coaching training. I learned about what is leadership, what is coaching, how to actively listen, respond, and where the assumptions are in that communication. And that I learned that I didn't really actively listen to people a lot, and I assumed about what they meant a lot. And the assumptions were always bad about me.
Yeah.
So by learning how to do that communication, I really got a few steps ahead in trying to figure out how all of this works. And I guess it all started when years ago, before I was tester even. I think this is 20 years ago. I'm getting old.
Oh no.
Hopefully.
We're not getting old.
I was working in a workplace where I often came in conflict with my boss. My boss sent me to a communication training, like, please learn how to talk to me. And I never learned how to talk to her. We were just always in conflict. But in that training, I learned a lot about how I personally degraded myself. And therefore, whenever someone said something to me, I would always be like, no, but... So unpeeling that whole onion to right now, it's, self-discovery, learning to accept compliments, very difficult still. Dealing with emotions. I
like the metaphor you had with the onions, because I did a lot of coaching learnings too, and I always liked it that we can put one onion part away, but there's another one, and then we can go deeper. And it is a process to all the self-awareness about how to deal with myself in my lifetime, to get to the core of the onion, and then.
And every time I'm surprised there's another layer.
Yeah, that's true.
And in every layer, there has been a big lesson for me, also how to deal with feeling like an imposter all the time.
Yeah. Now, imposter syndrome is a sometimes well-known word in some communities. When did you realize, or was there a moment when you said, this is it, and I have to deal with it? Was this a moment, or was it more a process, like fluent, and after looking backwards you see, okay, this is imposter?
I remember the moment when I realized I was going to have to deal with it. I just finished my testing training, and I never went to university. I didn't go to college. I didn't study. So I finished middle school and then tried to study, but as soon as in the Netherlands it's mandatory learning until you're 18, and then you can quit. And I turned 18 and I really hated my study. I was training to become a primary school teacher. And I found out that I don't really like kids that I don't know. So that's a big problem if you're in front of a class. So I started getting nightmares about being in classrooms with children all the time. And then I figured I need to stop school. So I did. And I started working. And after about 8 or 9 years, I got into testing. And after the training, when I got sent to my first assignment to interview there, they asked me like, hey, what did you study? And that's the moment when I realized this question is going to come towards me so much. And in my first few employers, when I was a tester, they always said, yeah, in a couple of years, you're going to have to get that degree. We'll help you with that. But somehow I never got to that point. And throughout the years, it's become from feeling like an imposter for not having the diploma to actually being kind of proud of it, because I've come a long way as a tester, and I'm now an experienced test manager, and I do really well. And not having it didn't bar me at all. So that was the first moment when I realized I'm going to have to start dealing with it, because this question is going to come up. I feel insecure about it. I feel lesser than my peers. And it took many more years to realize that I am not less. And in some ways, I am not, because I wasn't trained to think in a certain way, I can think way more freely and creatively about problems. And that usually helps me more than it bothers me.
Yeah. I can totally relate it. But I studied I just went from school to IT, and I know this question. So what did you study? No, I did not study anything. So it's great how you learn to deal with that.
Yeah, I've learned to build it into a great story. I like to tell stories.
Yeah.
And it is a great story because factually, my saxophone got me into testing.
Yeah.
So that's a fun story to cover up the fact that I wasn't trained.
Yeah. Okay, we want to hear this story. How did you get there?
Well, when I was 22, my friend Ilse said, hey, you should come play in orchestra with me. And I was like, yeah, it's not for me. But she persevered. She really told me, no, come, look, we have this concert. And I went to the concert. And at the concert, she had her little solo and she did amazing. And it was wonderful. But they played more songs than just her solo. And at some point, this big bass tuba guy walks to the front, sits down, and he plays a solo. He played the Teddy Bear Picnic. And I loved that tune. I don't really remember the cartoon that it is connected to, but I loved the tune. And then I was like, if you could play that, that's amazing. Then she was like, hey, but why don't you? And then she said she plays the saxophone, the alto saxophone. And she told me, here, try mine. I was like, dude, I don't know. This is not my thing. And then she said, no, but we have quartet rehearsal for saxophones. On Tuesday, please come to the place and then you can see the baritone. I was like, baritone? I don't know what that is. So I went there and then I had that magical moment where the suitcase opened and I was like, can I learn this? And then I did.
Okay.
Yeah. And when you're part of an amateur orchestra, you're part of an association, a vereniging, as we call it in Dutch. And you have to volunteer. And we had to do bar shifts on a different night when another orchestra was using our space. And at some point, I was doing that bar shift with Joris Meerts. He was a Dutch tester. I think he's a business analyst now. And I was nagging him about the difficulty I had to get anything done in SAP. Because I was doing a job and I had to put hours into SAP and to do some project configuration, and it was difficult. You had to take that way and that way and that way and that way and double click. I hated it, but I found a way, and he listened to that and he said, you should become a tester. This is amazing. So he put in a good word for me at his employer, and that's how I was accepted in the training, because they usually don't take people without diplomas. But his word helped because he was like, she learned that saxophone in 4 months and then she was in the orchestra. So please take her.
Yeah, great. Oh, great story. A great way
And
to come
that
into
covers
testing.
up the education.
Yeah, great. When we come back to our testing career, when in testing teams, when I know a lot of testers who are not really good connected to their environment, to in a collegial way, to in a social way. So what can you say them? How can they deal with if they have such a little voice in there and they're feeling alone in this environment? What can they do?
Yeah, I work with trainees a lot, people who just start testing, and they suffer from, but I don't know anything a lot. And I always tell them that this is the most valuable testing time they're going to have. The less you know about the application you are going to test or about whatever, the freer you can think and the more uninhibited way you can look at whatever you're testing. And you should tell everyone what you think and what you see because you have a fresh view. And that fresh view is worth gold. And I hope that I create an environment where they feel that. And I recently was at an assignment at a municipality where I got the opportunity to get one of those trainees in on my assignment because someone needed to set up test automation and that's not me.
Yeah.
So I was really happy that he could do that. He was very technically involved. And I really gave him all the opportunities to communicate, try, fail, and to spread the testing word, even though it was his first assignment and he wasn't that sure. And after a couple of weeks, he started to get more free and I supported it like, do you want to give the test update this week? And he was like, oh yeah, I'll try. And that's an environment that I actively pursue.
Yeah.
In trainees, but also in experienced testers. It's really nice if you are aware of your qualities, but like I know that I shouldn't test automate. I can talk the talk, but I don't walk the walk. And I'm very clear about that. I can advise management in you should do this and this and that, and you should hire those people to do that.
Yeah.
And in that way, I step over the fact that I know that I cannot do it. But I also try to use my abilities because I can talk the talk. I can speak fluent manager.
Yeah.
I can explain the pain they're going to have if they don't resolve the technical debt.
Yeah.
And so around me, I try to establish that framework.
Yeah, and it's also what you said, also a part of the self-awareness, to know what I can and what I'm not able to do, and
Yes.
where are my boundaries, and what environment I have to create that we get a good collaboration in that with the other people who can something better than me or that.
Yeah, and I have around me a group of people that give me honest feedback.
Yeah.
And I keep them very close because I need that honest feedback. I need the negatives and the positives because I know that my mind is not fair. So I really need to get that from elsewhere. And not everyone needs that this way, but I've cultivated that group around me carefully because I do need it.
Yeah. Honest feedback is so important. And it's good to have an inner circle who is delivering that.
And that's also one of my tips in dealing with imposter syndrome, that you have to be cognizant of who you ask feedback from and why you ask them feedback.
Yeah.
Every time I ask my parents, should I change my job? They say, no, you are steady where you are. This is what you know. But in all of those cases, it was better for me to change my job. But they say no because they love me and they don't want my life to change. But I needed a change.
Yeah.
So the people I should ask aren't my parents that don't want me to change. That are people that are challenging me and people that know how much more I could grow. And that's not my parents. They don't see me in the workplace.
Yeah. So choose who you take feedback from and who you ask about this stuff. Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much, Linda. It's a pleasure to talk with you. I like that you are so open with your inner life. We don't see it so much in a text base. So I really appreciate that.
More people should do it.
Yeah,
it's great.
We should all do that even more than because we are all such humans, and
Yes.
we have to deal with that, and we can help each other. So I really found it very valuable that you give us some tips and some insights. How can we deal with imposter with our inner voice, chatting around this day?
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And enjoy the rest of the conference. And I hope we will have another episode in the future too.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
Thank you. This was fun.
Great.